I'm not gonna judge. Yeah, you better hide that. We're not sponsored by a sports drink company.
Good save.
No. Alright, ready? Apparently not. Hey, we're two fat guys.
And we just continued to watch more Disney films.
That's it. That's a little...
I don't want to use the exact same thing as I have before. Pretty sure all the other ones have started with, we just watched more Disney films. Anyway.
I'm pretty sure every other film we just kind of say the same 4 generic comments about every movie and move on.
That's fair.
So, we are in the era I call the pre-Renaissance Disney, and I call it that because it happens before the Renaissance, and I'm a super genius.
Really creative name.
I know. So, that's what I get paid for. This era is notable for a change in the guard at Disney. I mentioned in our last video, which is Middle Disney, as I called it, that was sort of the end of the 9 old men. This is the era when you start seeing more names crop up that will be very important to shaping the future of Disney. I mentioned Don Bluth briefly at the end of the last video. This is also when John Lasseter first works for Disney.
Future Pixar.
This is also the first work that we will see out of Glenn Keane, which is a very famous animator who you might recognize from characters like, Ariel, the Beast, Pocahontas.
None of them are ringing a bell.
None of them ring a bell, yes. To this day, still a very influential animator. Worked on Princess the Frog, worked on Frozen, Tangled. I think Frozen, definitely Tangled.
I was going to say, I don't know animators, but that name still sounds familiar.
Yeah, Glenn Keane, he's a very big name. Also, this is the first work from Ron Clements and John Musker, who are also the directors of some famous films you might have heard of, like Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Princess and the Frog. Yeah, the upcoming Mona.
I don't know anything about that.
We'll talk about it at the very end. The 9 old men, it's sort of passing on to the people they train, because also before this time, the 9 old men founded what you might have heard of, especially if you watched the Pixar documentary, which I hope you all have watched, A Pixar Story. So good. Cal Arts, which is a school that has an animation program that is basically, hey, Disney has an animation program, we should all learn from the Disney animators. And it was like the 9 old men taught these classes. A lot of famous people went there, including the names I just mentioned. Well, some of the names I just mentioned.
A lot of the Pixar Brain Trust.
Yeah, the Pixar Brain Trust went there. Tim Burton was a student in the animation program. Yeah, Tim Burton was
it makes sense. I just didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why he gets very stylized. This is also kind of an era where they're searching for an identity. They wanted to make their own mark. And it makes sense because we had some experimentation with the old animators in the previous sort of selection of films. Now it's the new young animators, and they need to further distinguish themselves from what they did before, but also still make quality films. So it's still an era that kind of feels like it's searching for an identity. They're kind of reaching out, trying different things. They try a little bit of some fairy tale stuff. They try some lighthearted sort of nature tales.
The closest thing we have to a princess story is Black Cauldron, and that's... Yeah, I wouldn't even call that just because it has a princess in it.
Yeah, that's not a princess story. There's a princess in it, but it's not a princess story. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about here. Starting with, in 1977, The Rescuers. Now there's
the year Star Wars came out.
Mm-hmm. Now I do want to note that this may seem odd because of anyone who's paying attention, the Winnie the Pooh the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, came out in 1977 as well. So it may seem odd to split an era in a year, in the middle of a year. But The Rescuers, where you really start to see a lot of the work from these new animators as opposed to the old ones. Because the old ones were the shorts, so all the Winnie the Pooh stuff was animated years earlier.
That and its sequel is part of the Renaissance, so it makes sense to have this be part of the Renaissance.
Yes, so it's... so The Rescuers, it was definitely sort of the movie that is the indication of the change. But for those who don't know the story, it's kind of based on the idea of this sort of mouse UN that go around helping people. And there's this little girl who is being held against... All you found being a story, she's being held against her will down in the bayou somewhere in New Orleans, somewhere, thereabouts. So she calls for help, and the animals relay this message to this animal UN, and they send these 2 hilariously mismatched mice to go... That's a nice phrase. To go and rescue... I said to myself. To go and rescue this little girl. So... There's all sorts of plot there. There's tons of... I said so many words to set up a plot. Which feels amazing.
Was it this movie, Rescuers Down Under, or The Great Mouse Detective, that had like 4 mice jumping on a keyboard to send a message?
I believe it was Rescuers Down Under. Because Rescuers Down Under has a very extended message-sending sequence.
That's right.
So I'm pretty sure it was there. I mean, I may be wrong, and feel free to watch every Disney movie and tell us.
Yes, I couldn't remember.
In the comments, that we will never read.
Sadly.
Someone watched the intro. It is Rescuers Down Under. Thanks, future Sam. This movie, though, it looks great. There's not a... they kind of, keep Xeroxing, but they're getting better and better at the technology. And as time obviously moves forward, this movie looked good. I'm tempering myself because I know what's coming. Like, if I didn't know what the Renaissance was going to look like, I'd be like, this film looked really great. But a lot of great urban stuff in this, especially in the beginning. They get two very different locales that we haven't really had a lot of. Because basically it's set in, like, New York City and the Bayou, which are two areas that we haven't touched on a whole lot up to this point, Disney. Like, we had urban London in, 101 Dalmatians and things like that, some European cities, but we never really touched on, New York City, very rectangular, very skyscrapery urban setting, and then also the Bayou, which is...
The Bayou.
Yes.
It's unreplicatable.
You can think like, oh, well, the jungle, but I mean, it's different from the jungle. It's different from forest, which we've done a lot of forest. And, we had the Jungle Book, which was great, and also an interesting place to set, which we didn't really talk about. Just visually, it's interesting new places. So even if the backgrounds maybe aren't as detailed and they are still doing some suggestive stuff, it's interesting because I'm like, oh, these are new things that I'm seeing suggested, and also, like I said, there's just so much plot in this. Like there's so much potential there for tell the story, and they do tell a story. There's still time wasting nonsense. There's him getting trapped in that bottle, trying to get the message out.
It's adorable.
Which is adorable. Should mention that the male mouse is Bob Newhart, and just brings the sort of put upon affable charm that only Bob Newhart can to a role.
Yes,
you just hear it in his voice, and he's just a little overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed
by
doing
the best he can.
Yeah, he's doing the best he can, and he's just overwhelmed by life's existence. Like, you have a feeling that if he went to get a sandwich in the morning and they asked what he would like on it, he would just feel like it's too much pressure on him. And then he's on this wacky adventure to save this little girl's life. So,
this pretty lady.
So this pretty lady that he's very overcome with. Good villain design in this. We described her earlier. We were talking about it as sort of a less classy Cruella, as I put it, or Sam put it,
a white trash Cruella de Vil. Same sort of
out of proportion. You got the crazy eyes.
Yes, same feel, but very. She's not wearing fur coats.
Mm-hmm. She has those sweet pet crocodiles.
Yeah,
they have fan boats in this movie. They do all the stuff you would want them to do that they hadn't done since they're in the bayou. Like, all right, let's do it. Let's commit to being in the bayou.
Can you do a setting in the bayou and not have fan boats?
I mean, you can, but you would get chased out of town. It doesn't matter what town you're in. We'd all gather pitchfork and torches, and
I guess you'd probably have to set it in a different time. Like Princess and the Frog doesn't have any fan boats.
That's true, but they have riverboats.
Yes. Oh, yes.
They have a riverboat, which that'd be the same thing. Oh yeah, okay, fine, we'll set it then. Okay, but don't have any riverboats. No, you don't get to do that. But Rescuers is this one.
They had little creature fan boats.
Yes, they had like a creature. It was like the friggin' bug,
like a dragonfly or something, was on a leaf.
Yeah, it was everything you would want them to do.
I was like, this is a fan boat chase. This is what's happening right now.
Plus, also, just all the characters still have all the classic hallmarks of Disney animation. You can tell that these guys studied their shit, and they did a good job of doing Disney characters. They had the emotion and the heart in their bodies. There's once again the great anthropomorphized animals that still kept their unique animal features.
Yes.
Overall, really enjoyable. This one, I don't know if I had watched this before this marathon. I know I had seen parts of Rescuers Down Under.
I'm sure I'd seen parts of it, but again, actually, maybe not. I might have been mixing that up with Chip and Dale.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I watched a lot of Chip and Dale. My parents thinking about, like, they were never huge about forcing, like, old Disney on me, because we had so many good kids movies when I was growing up that we watched those contemporary ones. But some I remember, like Robin Hood and Pinocchio, I have very strong memories of. This one, I don't have any sort of recall of. So it was delightful to get to sort of watch a nice plot-heavy film that had good animation and I had not seen before. So that was a nice one for me. Moving on to Fox and the Hound, which I had seen at least part. I'm sure I've seen all of it before. And like I remember parts of this and seeing lots of sequences of
My mom calls it Todd and Copper.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's favorite. Oh, Todd and Copper. When are you guys getting that one? Never, because that's not a thing, Mom. This one, I do want to mention that during production of Fox and the Hound, Don Bluth leaves Disney to start a competing animation company, which is a big deal if you know who Don Bluth is. If you don't,
guys, I can do this myself.
If you don't, you'll know why it's a big deal in two movies. When I start talking about some of the stuff Don Bluth did once he left. But yeah, so they're going in production Fox and Hound, and he just had some disagreement with some of the things that were going on. There were some budget cuts, even more at Disney, because that's always the story of it. It's always budget cuts, except for
I mean, it's and it's a business. So,
except for coincidentally, the time of their best creative stuff is when they gave them a bunch of money and throw money at it. Who knew? So he leaves the company. Fox and Hound is also notable for the first film that John Lasseter personally worked on. He did some character animation. He did some animation specifically for the introduction of, I believe, the Hound, and also he did some animation on the climactic battle with the bear in this one. Once again, thank you, Pixar Story, for giving me all these fun factoids. This is an interesting cast. The young Hound, correct?
Yes, yeah, he's the Hound.
Yeah, young Hound is Corey Feldman.
And the old Hound is Kurt Russell.
Or Snake Plissken, as I call him.
His name is Kurt Russell.
His name is Snake Plissken.
Which I certainly don't know of another movie where those two actors have played
the same role.
In
if not, you can win a lot of bar bets that way.
Yeah.
By which two actors have played the same role, and name anyone else with those two, and they will never pick those two together. And then also the adult Fox was Mickey Rooney.
Yeah.
Apologies to young Fox. I don't remember who you are. I hope you're super famous and you have tons more money and you're happier than I am, because you deserve that. But I don't know who you are, so. But Mickey Rooney, who does a great job of sounding like a teenager, somehow sounds a great job of sounding like a teenage Fox.
Yeah, like my personal experience with Mickey Rooney
is that he's 9,000 years old?
Is that he was in Night at the Museum, where he was 1,000,000 years old, and I may have seen him on the national tour of Wizard of Oz, where he was slightly less than 1,000,000 years old. But still playing older characters. So when I saw his name in the credits, I was like, how old are these characters getting? And then I remembered that, this was in the early 80s, and he was...
And also it was animation, so...
Yeah.
You can have a raspy voice as a teenager, so...
Yeah, but
it worked really well for sort of the personality he went with it. Like, it was shocking how well... Because, in my mind, I think Mickey Rooney crossed the old guy, but, like, no, it's just sort of like...
What? Actors can play different characters?
But, I mean, his voice is so distinctive that there was no mistaking the fact that it was Mickey Rooney, but there's also, I had no problem believing the age and the sort of personality of the character, which is, I think, speaks volumes to him as an actor.
But young Corey Feldman's Hound, like, howl is adorable.
It is adorable. This one, while it does do a better job telling a story than some of the older ones, doesn't quite live up to as much of the plot as The Rescuers. It's sort of a tale of two halves. Like, okay, they're going to be young and friends, and then they're going to be old and come back. And then it kind of flounders at the end. They know they need to have some more stuff happen. So they're like, let's have Fox meet a lady, like, an hour and 10 minutes into this film.
Yeah.
Just so there can be a lady for the last exciting sequence. Which, I mean, having a woman there raise the stakes, but it feels kind of like a cheap way to raise the stakes by suddenly giving him a libido and having him fall for a lady fox. And that's saying I like all the individual things, like the scene of him and the lady fox getting along and like him being embarrassed in front of her. Great stuff, great, well written. Just as a plot as a whole, it doesn't really follow any sort of through lines. Just kind of comes out of nowhere to create some tension towards the end.
We'd be remiss to not talk about how the redneck villain just starts firing his weapon at this old lady.
Yes.
Like, this fox goes through his yard and he runs after it with a gun. All right, I can.
Yeah, that's what old farmers do.
You're in the middle of nowhere.
That checks out.
You have fox hunting dogs. That's your thing. Cool. It gets into the car of an old woman who's driving down the road, and you continue to fire your shotgun
into her car. That's attempted murder.
Yeah, and then he confronts her, or she confronts him, and yells at him, takes his gun, fires it into his car, destroying it. And goes. So, I mean, good for her for sticking up for herself.
But maybe call the cops?
Yeah, is there any
County
sort of law in this town?
I don't know, man.
Are they so far into the middle of nowhere?
Certain parts of West Virginia, it's just some wild cowboy country.
Yeah, but Jesus. That's just not okay.
Yeah, no, we derailed our viewing for a full 5 minutes just talking about this old just firing on each other. So Fox and Hound, it's some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Plot not as good as Rescuers, but still. And Corey Feldman and Snake Plissken play the same person.
Kurt Russell.
His name's Snake Plissken. Moving on to The Black Cauldron, 1985. This is all right. Have any of you seen this movie? Anyone? Comment below. Sam will read it later.
I'm not even entirely sure I've seen this movie.
I'm fairly certain you were. Your face was pointing at the screen that had this playing. That's all I can really guarantee. Well, your face was pointing at your phone and the screen.
Be that as it may.
And it was playing loudly at you. The volume was loud, so
I don't remember. There's the fight scene with the witch where he was transforming into the different.
It's close. That's Sword in the Stone. So I guess that's actually. I'm kind of proud of you. That's pretty close. We actually didn't talk about that though. So we said, all right, we're gonna jump back in time, hop in your time machine. Fans at home, edit this out, put it in our last video.
Yeah, because that was
and then post it on your own YouTube channel. That was the one wacky time-wasting animal nonsense I did enjoy, is Merlin's transforming battle with the witch, the
Madam Mim.
Madam Mim. Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. It's kind of like the transforming into animals equivalent of Time Cop 2.
Wow, deep pull even for us.
I think it's a normal pull for us.
That's fair. We talk about that movie a lot.
It's great. It's like, haha, now I'm this dragon. It's like, oh yeah, well now I'm this thing. So you're dragging us to victory. It's like, well now I'm this, so you are a thing.
It's just like this giant like rock, paper, scissors back and forth like of animals trying to best each other until eventually she becomes a dragon.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, what can you do against a dragon? She lands on him. She like jumps, flies, lands on him. And they think he's gone. Mm-hmm. He's totally gone. And then they can hear his voice and they don't know where he is. And it turns out that he made himself into like a virus or a bacteria or a germ or whatever, and like made her sick. And like that was how he won the fight.
Which just inspired, and also it was visually interesting. It was the most visually interesting. Like, even though the other animal stuff was entertaining, that was by far the most.
Oh yeah, because you had so many. Because Disney.
How did we not talk about that last time?
I don't know. We're not bright.
We're not bright people. We take poor notes. Yes. That's why.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. So Black Cauldron.
Okay, so
fantastic.
Black Cauldron. I'm gonna give you the fast and dirty because I don't think Sam knows anything about this. It is by far the darkest Disney film up to this point, and possibly still to this day. It is the first one to be rated PG, I believe, just because it was creepy. And they're like, kids can't watch this. They were like,
like the Undead Army.
There were skeletons and corpses being reanimated in very realistic and very creepy fashion. There is one thing I really. John Hurt plays the villain. It's based off
he like a very Mum-Ra, horrible looking sorcerer dude?
He was kind of like a shouter. He was like a skull person. He was like
a Nazgul.
Yeah, he's like a Nazgul. Yeah, that's actually probably a pretty good call. Yeah, and basically he was like, he was going to get the Black Cauldron and then rule the world. So basically, the sorcerer finds this kid that he thinks is chosen, and he needs the
or has like a pig friend or something that is
special. His pig can tell the future. That's what it is. The pig can like divine things. So the pig told him like,
there's a Gollum character.
There's a Gollum that's delightful. He's a henchman. He's a henchman for John Hurt. So John Hurt's this big scare.
Is he? I don't remember.
Yeah, obviously you don't remember.
I'm sorry. Continue.
Okay. So basically, it's the story of this kid, and it just kind of keeps moving. It's like the only premise is like, okay, there's this Black Cauldron, and you are destined to be a hero. And then, he gets captured, and then they're escaping, and then they go to another dimension to get this Black Cauldron.
The pig can see the future.
Yes. He's divining. That's what divining means.
Yes. Did you say that?
Yes.
I wasn't paying attention.
I know you weren't.
I'm not even paying attention to the synopsis of this movie. I can't do it.
It's actually pretty interesting. It is... It's sort of a weird plot structure, but there's a plot always happening. One thing I really liked is there is a princess in this film. It is not a princess film, but there's a princess in this film, and I really like that she was not perfect. She was, first off, younger. The hero, and they probably play about the same age. I would say they look like 15-year-olds to me, and that's what a lot of Disney princesses are like 15 or 16, and these kids actually look it though. But her hair wasn't perfect. Like she didn't have this she had a dress on, but it wasn't like this grand, unrealistic, perfect thing. It got rumpled and wrinkled, and her hair was a little frayed and a little crazy at times. And I was like, oh, it's an actual human. That's what human people look like. So I really appreciated having that. It's also interesting. Plus, no one's ever seen it, so there's a good chance if you watch it, it'll be a new movie for you.
That even applies for me, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was not wildly successful, as you might imagine, but it once again, like, I'm not going to fault this group of animators for taking chances because
absolutely not.
It is decidedly different from the exception of Sam's mind, it's different from everything that came before it. In Sam's mind, it's Sword in the Stone again.
Kind of Sword in the Stone.
Yeah, no, Madam Mim, she shows up. And then John Hurt's like, I'll turn into a germ. Like, no, that's not. None of that is accurate. So check it out, Black Cauldron, 1985. Moving on, just a year later, in 1986, was The Great Mouse Detective.
Mouse Sherlock.
Which we're seeing there at first, like, is this Mouse Sherlock? Like, it's probably something like Mouse Sherlock.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be, like, sort of loosely based.
But it's just Sherlock.
Yeah, like, where Sherlock is in it. Like, they live in 221B Baker Street, and, like, occasionally you hear Sherlock and Watson talking, and, like, about their own case that they're doing that's totally unrelated.
Which is great, because apparently they took that audio from an old Basil Rathbone Sherlock film. So they looked at the audio of Sherlock and Watson talking directly from an actual Sherlock Holmes, a famous Sherlock Holmes film, and just threw it in the movie. This is great. The villain's awesome. Radigan, one of the great villain songs, probably the best in Cruella de Vil, the villain song. Radigan, who's not a rat.
He's not. He gets really angry if you imply that he's a rat.
But he has this hilariously elaborate supervillain plan to replace the queen with a robot.
Robot mouse queen. It's a mouse queen, and then he's going to replace her with a robot mouse queen.
Which I'm just happy that sentence gets to be said. I never seen this movie. Like I
don't think I had.
I don't even really knew it existed until I started making a list of Disney films, and yeah, how did everyone let this sneak by? Shame on you, universe.
There's a big fight in Big Ben, like inside the workings of the clock.
The most impressive thing is the whole climax of the film. After he gets exposed for showing the robot queen, it's a chase. He flies away on his Zeppelin, his mouse-sized Zeppelin, and Sherlock gives chase, and they fight.
Whoa, not Sherlock.
I'm sorry, Basil. Whatever.
I don't know.
It's Basil is his name because it's named after Basil Rathbone. Basil gives chase, and they have this great fight inside of Big Ben. So they're on gears, which were computer animated and look actually great because they're nothing but geometric shapes.
I was gonna say, yeah, at that time, like using.
And then they're fighting on the clock face, and it's exciting and just well drawn, well paced. It's a great action sequence, animated or no. Like if it had been a live action stunt sequence, I would have been impressed with the action and the pacing of that fight.
What year did that come out?
1986.
That means they were probably already working on that when Back to the Future came out, and they had their climactic moment on a clock face. And I wonder if they were like, God damn it!
Except it was on the clock face, like they were inside the clock. While they had stuff on the clock face, the most visually impressive stuff was inside the clock because they had a lot of stuff with riding the gears and things. It was just really really cool to look at. I also want to mention
like Sherlock had to make an invention while he was falling.
Yes. He had to save that. He made like a thing to fly.
Yeah, he made a little pedal gears and a propeller.
Because anyone who knows any Sherlock, like him and his great villain, do this fall at the end. They fall into the mist. Like, okay, Sherlock sacrificed. Well, I'm sorry, Basil sacrificed himself to get rid of Ratigan. But then, because it's Disney, like he saves himself and he comes up on this hilarious invention out of the remnants of the Zeppelin. I do want to mention, just from a greater standpoint, that this film, when it came out, was financially overshadowed by a film that came out on the same day by Don Bluth's independent animation studio, a little film you may have heard of called An American Tail.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So while this movie is great and actually did financially pretty well, it was just it lost and was overshadowed in every way by American Tail.
Because America.
Well, Steven Spielberg produced, a big name quality Disney animator started an animation studio, and so they had the chops stamped to Disney, and they did, and they beat them. So moving on, after that we have Oliver and Company, which is 1988. So the first film that we were alive for when it came out.
Yay!
Yay! So few old people or few young people, I don't know, whatever. But so we were abouts on the earth when this movie was released in theaters. Oliver and Company, which as Sam knows is the name of the classic Charles Dickens story Oliver and Company. Yeah, so it's based on Oliver Twist, except it's a cat and dogs, because of course it is.
Yeah,
and it's set in
humans are hard.
It's set in 1980s New York, because of course it is. Well, I said something.
Which, you know what? That's a great place for that story. Like
it's true. It worked
really well.
Yeah, I had no qualms about it.
Like, yeah, Dickensian London and 1980s New York, not terribly different.
Yeah.
As far as the class at which these characters are in.
Mm-hmm. This once again, this one I've noticed. This one I was a little bothered by the suggestive backgrounds, like when they're zooming into New York in the beginning.
Yeah, there's
like,
a lot of.
It was as if someone like took this legal pad and was like, okay, so you got a skyscraper here. This is the worst pencil ever. You got a skyscraper, you got some lines, and there's some windows. That's it. And then they just put that on a camera.
Yeah, it was like
someone just pulled a camera up to that page. Like that's what it looked.
It was like storyboards never got finished. Like, someone saw the storyboards and was like, great, cut it, print. Like,
What?
No, that's...
Like,
right.
we have to save money. That's the story of Disney.
All right, sure.
Cheech Marin's in this movie.
Cheech Marin's in this. Sort of preamble to his star turn. The thing that Cheech Marin is most known for, Lion King. You know, whenever people hear the name Cheech Marin, they immediately just think of Lion King.
First thing they say. Second thing they say, Oliver and Company. And
Yep.
those are the only things they ever think of.
Yeah. I mean,
Only two things.
I wish him well in whatever other career he has, but
I'm sure it's only those two things. A lot of children's film fans are Cheech Marin fans. So, no, he does a great job, though. He's sort of the standout in the voice acting cast. That's just sort of why he jumps to mind.
yeah.
He probably also had the best bits written for him. He was
the little tough...
He was
with the Chihuahua with a Napoleon complex.
Yeah, which, great call.
Yeah.
But all the gang they were really interesting drawn, because you could have just had this gang just disappear into each other. They did have enough of a personality to stand out from each other. I did enjoy that. I really like that. They didn't sort of blend to each other. So while Cheech Marin is my favorite out of that group, like, all the different dogs had their personality and their roles.
Oh, yeah. Artful Dodger, sure caused a lot of traffic accidents.
High body count. Artful Dodger.
He's jumping across cabs and everything. And
he's the real villain.
Yeah. Countless human lives.
Yeah. Beyond the terrible backgrounds, the animation looked alright. The characters looked good. Interesting design. Artful Dodger had a good strut. They gave great personality to the animals through their movements. My biggest problem with the film is that the plot can't get straight what it wants to do. It kind of splits time between the plot of Oliver versus... Because Oliver gets adopted by this rich girl who has this famous show dog who is, who doesn't want a cat in there taking her attention or taking any of her money away. So she's trying to get rid of Oliver and get him back on the streets. And then also there's the plot of Fagin versus Sykes and trying to collect on this debt. And so they don't really, they technically intersect because the rest of the gang goes and gets Oliver instead of raising more money to help pay off the debt. They don't interact enough to make it feel safe. So while stuff is always happening, it's like two different things are happening side by side. And they don't really come together at all until the very end. Yeah, not in a satisfying Curb Your Enthusiasm everything.
Yeah, it's like an A plot and a B plot of a sitcom as opposed to a coherent movie.
With with subplots and things like that. But it looks good. And honestly, with this film, I should give more credit, but I just know we're so close to the things that's to come that I'm just like...
Yeah.
Throughout this era, what I wrote down is that there's full plot throughout. We're fully into the age where they understand that stories need to have plot, and they do a good job of it. So good on them. Also, there was enough financial success, and now they have the right people in place to yield the magic that's about to come. Because things like this you observe that this for being pre-Renaissance, these movies are all actually pretty good.
Yeah, I assumed that the movies before the famous Renaissance were going to be, pretty crappy, because I thought that's how it would work. We had a bunch of crappy movies, and now they're good, and calling out the Renaissance.
But that's not the case, because the Renaissance like that couldn't happen it couldn't happen by accident. It had to happen by the right people coming along and getting in place, and also there was enough financial success that they were more comfortable putting a little more money into their next feature. So with the right people, the right resources, and also they had competition. It is no coincidence that Don Bluth was very successful and they started doing good. Oh yeah, by the way, Oliver and Company was once again overshadowed by a competing film that came out that weekend, a Don Bluth production you might have heard of, a little film called The Land Before Time. Came out that same weekend.
Jesus.
So yeah, once again, it was kind of financially successful, but not Land Before Time financially successful. So yeah, I don't think it's not a coincidence that they had competition and
then they got really good.
That is not a coincidence, and I couldn't be happier that it happened. I do want to mention John Lasseter just briefly in this before we wrap up this video. He got fired during this. John Lasseter, for anyone who knows what happens to him and in the future.
Wasn't that over the Brave Little Toaster?
Kind of. Well, he just kind of floated around. They put him on some projects, and he liked computer animation and went on to be the real creative force behind Pixar and now Disney. So what he did is he made a short where he had computer animated backgrounds entirely and then hand-drawn characters on top of it, and he wanted to do the Brave Little Toast that way, and he pitched it, and the studio head was like, is this going to be cheaper or take any less time? He's like, no, it's going to take about the same time, it costs about as much as just a regular film, it's not going to do anything extra. He's like, well, the only reason we do this is to save time or money. And then they called him to the office that day and like, well, like, okay, you worked on your project, you did your story development, you had your pitch, and your employment's at an end. We're not renewing your contract any further. And so he was just out on his ass. And the things he would go on to do were amazing. But we'll say that for a Pixar marathon. Yeah. But I just want to mention that because we did mention that he was there, and he was gone also in this short span. So the next time we're going to see you, we could start talking about the Disney Renaissance. And I'm super excited for that. It's just going to be a lot of fanboy gushing, like, oh my god, these movies are so good. But as for now, thanks for watching. We're Two Fat Guys.
And sorry for wasting your time.
Even though I know who Don Bluth is, there's not a single time when I mention his name that I don't think of Arrested Development.
This is a story of one man
who left Disney to form his own animation studio.